if I make it back tomorrow night and get the 5th Bible study, it'll be a super miracle from God.
You make it sound like it's a matter of life and death.
That's exactly what it is.
If you could take a peek into a secret society, what would you see?
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
Hey everybody, welcome back to LED Live. Today we have an exciting show, and I know we say that a lot on this show, but today you're not going to want to miss this show because we have an amazing guest, Chris Lang. Thank you for joining us. He has produced quite a number of films here. That is a very, very fascinating topic. About a guy who spent time in a secret society. I mean, got really deep in that secret society, and you're gonna want to hear this story because he's made a couple of films now centering around this person, Roger Morneau's life. And Roger Morneau has written a book. You tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, for those who don't know about Roger Morneau, Roger Morneau was a demon worshiper who became a Christian author and prayer warrior. There were 19-year-old couple, Cyril and Cynthia Gross, who met Cyril, the husband, met Roger at a factory one day, and somehow Roger became curious to find out about his beliefs, and they ended up studying the Bible together. And not only was Roger attacked by the spiritual realm, but also Cyril and Cynthia also experienced a very real spiritual force that was trying to destroy them for studying the Bible.
That's something I talk about a lot. You know, like Satan is not trying to attack the world. You know, you would think because they're messing around with stuff they'd get attacked more, but really, as long as they're drinking and partying, he just sits back and watches them, you know, self-destruct. It's when you make a decision like, I want to know the Bible, man, be ready for war, spiritual warfare. Satan is coming after you.
Yeah, and from what I understand, out of Roger Morneau's story, what's amazing about it is that it wasn't just being courted spiritually; he was being courted physically in the physical realm. He was actually had people approach him and say, "We want you a part of our team, and here's what our team does, and you'll receive special gifts for this." That was a fascinating part of this whole thing.
We would like to thank all of you who support this ministry through your donations and by buying merch from lightwear.shop. We cannot do this without you, and if you send in your pictures, we will put you on the show.
Yeah, you know, as a filmmaker and producing what is truth-based as best as you can, I started working with Roger's family. Roger passed away, by the way, in 1998. He wrote 6 books. And his first book is his conversion story, originally titled A Trip into the Supernatural.
I read that book. Amazing book.
Multiple times. It's like re-listen, re-watch, whatever. It's a great story.
It's very well known, both inside the Seventh-day Adventist Church and outside. People who aren't even Christian are fascinated by his testimony. But many people have questioned his story. And so as a filmmaker, when I got permission to work with Roger's daughter, who is responsible for his legacy, my concern was, Lord, help us prove the things that we can prove in order to add credibility to the things we can't prove. One of the things when you read Roger's book is he doesn't mention specific names in the secret society, most likely to protect his family.
Sure.
And he never revealed these specific locations in Montreal, but he gave enough detail so that I was able to, in my research, find out historical places in Montreal that were very credible based on the way he described where this mansion was, where this secret group met. But in addition to that, so I didn't want to spend time speculating in the film about things that we didn't have witnesses. And so I said, Lord, please help us. And so I have seen, anyone who's watching today can Google Roger Morneau's name and find people making posts that they don't believe his story because of X, Y, and Z. They'll say things like Roger was not born in a Roman Catholic family. They'll say Roger was never in the Merchant Navy in World War II. He was never in the Army. There's no evidence of that. Well, guess what God did?
What is that?
Over a period of 6 years. It took years to put this film together. And by the way, one film ended up becoming 3.
Nice.
That was not the plan.
Nice.
Charmed by Darkness is actually the project that presents his life story. And while I was working on this with the family, God opened the doors with research in Canada because Roger was French Canadian. We found documents in the Roman Catholic Church that proved that he was born and baptized there. As you know, they christen babies, and the Catholic Church is very good at documenting historical events like that, as well as going through the next phase in a young boy's life where they actually are able to take communion. Both of those documents were found, and you'll see them in the film.
Wow.
You also see documents from World War II. Now, just a little tidbit for people. In Canada, they don't have World War II war documents digitized. And for researchers who are writing on that era in Canadian history, you can't just walk into a library or a museum and go, hey, give me a file on Roger Morneau. No, that's why no one has ever seen this before, but you'll see it in the film.
Awesome.
I talked to 10 researchers, you guys, and 9 of them, over a period of 2 years, either didn't know what they were talking about, or were too busy, or not interested because it was a Christian film with Christian worldview, etc. But when the 10th one came along, it's a fascinating story because he's a PhD researcher. He had written several books on World War II, and amazingly, in 30 seconds while I was listening to him, I could tell he knew what he was talking about. You can't just walk in there. In fact, they're not only not digitized, they're in boxes in a warehouse, physical files.
Wow.
And you have to know the name of one of the ships the person worked on. And there were 12,000 Canadian civilians who worked on ships. They were called Merchant Navy seamen. And Roger says that he worked for 3 years. Well, fortunately, in this book that we came out with in 2015, which is his full manuscript, he mentions the name of one of the ships he worked on. I gave it to the researcher, and he ended up finding a file that in the folder with the ship's name. You have to then search through it and find a contract that ship had with an individual civilian.
Oh, wow.
And this researcher went through all these boxes until he landed on one that had Roger's name. He was 19 years old.
That's awesome.
Wow.
And you see that in our film. It was a miracle, but here's a greater miracle. This man, this 10th researcher, this PhD professor up in Canada and Ontario and Ottawa, the capital city. While I was talking to him, asking him to do this research for us, he asked me what it was about, so I gave him the 20-second elevator speech. It's about Roger Morneau, a demon worshiper who became a Christian author and prayer warrior. And there was a pregnant silence on the phone, and then a very defensive tone of his voice. He said, oh, so this is a Christian film. And I said, well, it does deal with Christian principles. And he said, but I happen to be a Jew from the Bronx. And I said, why? His name is Nathan. Well, Nathan, that is very interesting. Roger Morneau actually ended up studying about the biblical Sabbath, and he became a Sabbath keeper also.
Wow.
So we have that in common. Roger has that in common with you.
Wow.
And then he was quiet for a minute, and he said, but I happen to be a card-carrying atheist who is a Jew from the Bronx.
Well.
And remember, this is the 10th researcher over a 2-year period trying to find proof, documented proof, that Roger was telling the truth about his story.
Wow.
And so I sent up a prayer, Lord, this is your story.
Right.
It's kind of like in the Bible when Nehemiah, in the book of Nehemiah, it says, and I prayed to the Lord and I said to the king. It's like it was an instant prayer, Nehemiah. That was kind of what happened there in that space.
Wow.
And suddenly, this man, Nathan, he goes, well, I guess because you're asking me only to do research relating to the war records and not relating to Christianity, I suppose I can help you. And then he proceeded to cut his fee in half.
Whoa.
Which made it affordable for us. And so, but here's the rest of the story.
I think that even actually adds credibility to your story. That there's a guy that, like, he's not drumming up this information to try to promote.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think that's how God works sometimes, right? He uses the most unlikely guy so that you can't be like, oh yeah, they just made this up by talking to this guy and this guy. No, this guy doesn't want this story to be told.
That's a good point. It's not an infomercial for a particular worldview. We wanted to tell the facts as much as God would help us find. And so the rest of the story, guys, is that Nathan called me a week later, the day before he told me he was going to go into the library and start sorting through boxes. He said, Chris, I just wanted to call you. I'm not going to be able to go tomorrow because my mother just had a major heart attack in the Bronx. My wife and I have to get ready and fly to the Bronx tomorrow to check on her. The day before he was supposed to go. And for the next 30 minutes, he asked me question after question after question after question about this young Roger Morneau who left his childhood faith and ended up in demon worship in a secret society. And after 30 minutes, the reason I know it was 30 minutes is because I was looking at my watch. Where would you be concerned about if your mom just had a major heart attack?
I'd be on the plane. Or in the car.
Finally, I started feeling guilty, and I said, Nathan, listen, I know you
gotta
have
go,
to go.
buddy.
You got to get ready to go. I said, but listen. I said, when you find that document, because remember, we hadn't found, the end of the story had not been told yet. But I said, when you find the document, I said, Nathan, I believe you're going to find proof when you come back. I said, I would be happy to send you a copy of Roger's autobiography. When you find that document that we're looking for, I said, I bet you would be curious to read it by the time you get back and find that. And he was quiet for a minute. And remember, a PhD researcher, Jewish atheist. He said to me, I'd like to read that.
Wow, man, God is good.
Silent, teachable moment when people are in crisis. By the way, as a Christian, when someone's in a crisis, what's the first thing that you want to say to them?
Pray for you.
I couldn't help myself. I thought I might burn a bridge. But I told him I was going to pray for him, and he was quiet. And he said,
thank you.
I would appreciate that.
You know what I mean? The heart is open at that point.
So when he got back, the end of the story, of course, he went to the library. They know him by name in this government library because he's written multiple books on this topic of this era in history. And he texted me pictures of the documents that he found 3 hours later, and he called me on his cell phone from the library shouting out of joy like a kid in a candy store. And he was talking so loudly that the librarians who knew him by name had to tell him to be quiet. Isn't that amazing?
Wow, that is amazing.
Did you hear from him after he read the book?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not.
But imagine the testimonies in heaven, man. Like,
you know, I want to reach out to him. I've been praying for the right time to reach out.
So I have a question, kind of going back, and you'll probably get to this, but this gentleman that Roger met in the factory, his name was Cyril. Yeah. What made Roger want to ask him questions? Like, there's probably a lot of people that work at the factory, right? What is it about Cyril that Roger decides, I want to talk to this guy of all people?
Yeah, that's a great story, Keith. You know, actually it was his Jewish boss. And this is another historical fact. In Montreal during the 40s, the vast majority of garment manufacturing, which was a dominant industry in Montreal in the 40s, by the way. So again, there's historical precedent for this story that they're talking about. Men worked in dress factories, which seemed weird to a 21st century man. Was like, why would a guy work in a stitching thing embroidery shop? Well, back then that was high tech, and you earned a lot of money if you were artistic. And in the movie, you see Cyril actually had an embroidery machine in his garage, and I shot B-roll of him actually doing embroidery work with this handle under the desk, and I mean, it was legit. It was the same model that he used in the 40s.
Wow.
So you see that in the film, and then I see the historical information. The point is, 90% of the garment industry was owned by Jews.
Yeah.
And so when they talk about the Jewish boss calling Roger into his office and saying, "Hey, did you see the black guy this morning? I was showing him around the shop." Well, he says he doesn't work Saturdays. He keeps the Jewish Sabbath, and I want to know what denomination he works in. He goes to, because he says he's a Christian. And Roger said, "So what?" Because Roger comes up from a Catholic background, and Sunday he's been taught is the Sabbath, and in the traditional Christian concept, right? So, but he said, "Listen, I want you to sit next to Cyril on Monday, because he's starting on Monday. I hired him. He's really good. And I want you to find out what denomination that he
Look at that little
belongs to."
divine orchestration right there.
There you go.
You gotta sit next to this guy.
So he did a favor for his boss, who was a Jew, and his boss could not sleep. That's how much the Spirit of God gave him this, and he was a friend of Roger's, and they were friends. And so Roger sat next to Cyril on Monday.
Wow.
And you'll see the outgrowth of that. And to me, you guys, the greatest joy, I happen to be a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and one of the great joys for me in working on this was being able to work with Cyril and Cynthia. Again, here's behind the scenes. How could anyone know that Cynthia and Cyril were about to die? They were almost 90 years old when I interviewed them for this film, sharing their testimony. Cynthia was the only one who remembered exact Montreal street addresses where they studied with
That's
Roger.
impressive.
Studied and where Roger and Cyril were baptized, the exact building. She remembered the address.
Wow.
Cyril had long forgotten those details. But Cyril remembered other things that she didn't.
That's cool.
And so they were a team. Well, I interviewed them in the fall of 2014, and Cynthia suddenly died of a heart attack 3 months after that.
3 months.
Whoa.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
I had never met them
So she's
before.
never seen the culmination of all
project.
this.
No,
Wow.
no. And Cyril got cancer a year later and died.
Wow.
Cyril gave 3 interviews, and the first interview with the both of them together, again, to me, it's people can go, "Oh, that's just luck. You got lucky that you were able to interview." No, they were almost 90.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, I had tried to get a hold of Roger Morneau's family for 3 years,
Wow.
and no response. And I had almost
wow.
given up. I literally was getting ready to go back into the corporate world. And my brother, who's a pastor, prayed a heart-moving cry. You know, have you ever had someone pray for you that's so deep in your heart that you know they're being moved by the Spirit to pray very deeply for you? That was the kind of prayer he prayed. And on my way home, I was driving from Tennessee to Orlando. I got a call 2 hours later. Again, 3 years I've been trying to reach them.
Wow.
2 hours later, Roger's daughter calls me on my cell phone. I pull off the highway onto the shoulder, and we talked for almost an hour.
Wow.
And so I just praise the Lord, because Cynthia and Cyril were about to die. And without them, we wouldn't have the kind of
the detail.
testimony. Because when you think about the evidence that Roger really was a Satan worshiper, you really see it in our film. For those who are questioning if there's a real devil, Cyril finally, by the way, getting back to the fact, Cyril was not a Seventh-day Adventist at the time he studied the Bible with Roger.
Wow, I did not.
Whoa.
He was,
Cynthia was, but he was not. He was a Sunday Protestant.
Wow.
So what I love about this that's so compelling is that it's not an infomercial for a denomination.
right.
Right.
It's about the truth of the scriptures that
Right.
draws in to a commitment to a relationship.
That's interesting because he was keeping the Sabbath, though, or at least was telling the boss that he wanted it off, at least.
Exactly. See, he had been convicted, and this is how Cyril comes into the story, and you see it in the film developed. You're right. Why did he say that? It's because he had prayed a prayer just 2 weeks before at another factory. And he said, Lord, I know I've studied this Sabbath thing with the Adventist pastor. I don't agree with it. I don't think you care what day we keep. But if you care, give me one person that I can witness to.
That's amazing.
Give me one person.
Sent to him by a Jewish boss.
You look at this story, and really the highlight of the story is Roger, right? You know, in all of this. But really, God is working on two people at the same time.
Man.
Yeah.
It's very much.
And probably more than two people. You know, there's all these side stories of people bumping into each other and God answering prayers. It's incredible.
Can we play the trailer? And then I want to tell you a modern day bridge to our generation in this story.
Awesome. Let's play it.
If I make it back tomorrow night and get the 5th Bible study, it'll be a super miracle from God.
You make it sound like it's a matter of life and death.
That's exactly what it is.
Those aren't spirits. They're union workers.
There's power in Roger's story. There is something that doesn't want me to continue typing this.
Mr. Morneau.
This man is connected with the guy above, and you want to talk to her and pray for her.
I wanted to know what he knew and why his prayers were so powerful.
So this is going to be played for the first time on YouTube when?
March 20.
March 20.
Mark your
1 p.m.
calendars.
Sunday, March 20, 1 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay, that is right around the corner, and we will
You don't
put
wanna
a
miss it.
link to this where people can get a hold of this your YouTube page.
Thank you.
What is your YouTube page, by the way?
It's Live Streams Media, or My Live Streams is the channel where people can subscribe and get notified.
It's also available on Amazon Prime, right?
Correct. It's on Amazon Prime. It's on Tubi. It's on Roku. God has opened up a lot of doors.
Yeah.
But with YouTube, it was really exciting, you guys, because we got to, on one channel, got to put all 6 subtitle languages.
Oh,
nice.
So we have subtitles in German, in Spanish, in Portuguese, in French, in Japanese, and in English. And to be able to have all these languages to put on in one place is just really a blessing.
That's really neat.
Now, I don't know if you're going to bring up the other documentary, Beware of Angels, on this show or another show, are you?
Yeah, definitely. How much time do we have?
Keep going, man.
we got time.
All right. I want to tell one quick story. You just saw the trailer. And one of the things that I wanted to share, by the way, this is a shot behind the scenes of after one of the interviews.
This is the real Cyril with the actor Cyril?
So this is his grandson, Cyril III. Cyril Grosse is holding this book, this bound book. This is the copy that Roger Morneau of his conversion story that became this book.
Wow.
And it's amazing how Cyril kept a copy not only of the whole manuscript for all those years, which finally came out when I started researching. I was reading the whole thing and I was like, the world needs to see this God. And he did open a door. But in addition to that, Cyril had a copy of the actual Bible study pages
that's so awesome
that they used in 1946.
That's so awesome.
This is like 18 to 20 questions, and on the back there's notes. And back in the 40s, good Bible carrying people would just grab the first study, slide it in their Bible, and go off to their Bible study, and that was it. Well, these went out of print in 1950. And you can't get them anywhere.
Wow.
But Cyril kept them for 70 years.
Man.
Wow.
And one night I was like, Cyril, would you trust me to send those original pages? I believe that someday the Lord's going to want the whole world to see the study that saved Roger's life.
Wow.
And so he mailed them to me.
That's really cool.
I want to show you what happened the night I was scanning them. I promised you I would show you this. These are the actual pages he mailed to me several years ago. And a big bear came down our street that night.
Oh, wow.
And
what?
it sat down in a neighbor's yard and ended up running across the street and bursting through.
Oh, wow.
This is security camera footage. This bear is huge. That truck that he's walking in front of is 6 feet wide.
Oh, wow.
That was a big bear. He came twice. He came at the beginning of my journey in this film, the night I was scanning these Bible study pages, and 5 years later, he came through again and broke through my fence.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
This is footage from the top of the roof of my house. One day I was on the phone. I heard a bang. The treetop broke off the top of this tree, came down, hit my chimney, and then landed on my roof. I thought it was going to come through my roof. This was the week we announced post-production for Charmed by Darkness. This is a huge oak tree, and the whole top was broken off and slammed down on the top of my roof. And a whole nother top of another big oak tree came off as well. But there's some audio to this now. The day after, I drove down and I was looking for evidence to see if anyone else had been damaged. And there was no evidence anywhere in the neighborhood.
Wow.
This day, there was a little pile in the neighbor's yard across the street from my house. He had just mowed his yard, but this is my driveway.
Yep.
And you'll see as I'm driving up around this debris, you'll see the top of the tree had broken off and fallen down. And this was a very targeted attack.
Yeah.
Very much targeted. You could see right up there behind the house, the top that had been, the whole top of the tree ripped off. It's called a microburst.
Wow.
Only
over your house.
Only over my house. And I actually was on the phone and I heard what sounded like a freight train coming. It's like a tornado. It's a mini tornado that can come out of nowhere. And it came right behind my house, and you see the pictures for the first time, by the way. I've never shown these publicly. But this is another way that God was showing me that there are some forces that are very, very afraid of this truth, this story.
It reminds me of the story of Job. You know, came and destroyed his whole son's house, just like that.
It's not just a story that happened 2 generations ago. And one of the other things that God did while I was working on this is I mentioned that we were working with a publisher to bring out the full manuscript. One of the things that happened was the typed manuscript that Cyril sent me was too old and faded to get good OCR scans to create an editable digital document, right? So I had to hire someone to type from the typed pages so that we could get an editable document to the publisher and get this out to the world. So what happened was this woman, Amanda, was the third person, not the first, not the second, but the third person that we hired to do this project.
And this is the real lady.
What happened to the other two?
This is a real person. Sorry?
What happened to the other two?
Well, again, this is behind the scenes evidence that this is true. That all of this is true. Spiritual warfare. So the first person agreed to a price, started working on it, and had to quit a week later. She had a family emergency. Never happened to me before. Hired him on a freelancing website. Didn't know these people. Second person went and when you put out a bid, you'll get several people who give you offers. So I went to another one that had good reviews, hired her, she agreed. I never heard from her. She just disappeared within a couple of days.
Wow.
And so I went to my knees and I said, Lord, it's your story. If you want it out, please help us find someone. Well, Amanda, this young woman, was one of the people who had offered to do the book. Do you ever hire someone who has no reviews, who's brand new on a freelancing site?
Generally, no.
Pretty rare, right? Can you imagine that I was desperate by now?
Right.
And her note actually said something like, I read the summary that you sent out with your proposal, and this is material that looks really interesting to me. This was in her notes.
Wow.
And I was like, Lord, she has no reviews.
Right.
I don't know if she's going to be able to even type.
Right.
So we hired her.
Sometimes God, it's like God puts people in your path that really have a heart for it. It's not just somebody doing their job. She's like into it,
Right.
Yeah. I want you to know what happened was so amazing. In the trailer, you saw her. This is the actual person, and we reenacted her story.
Wow.
This is what happened, and you'll see this in the movie. She started typing this manuscript, and she realized that this was an answer to one of her prayers. See, I learned later that she had started reading the Bible on her own.
Wow.
And that she had kept a prayer journal. She would ask God questions that she didn't understand in the Bible. She wondered why the Christian world didn't keep the Bible Sabbath. And she was writing questions to God in her prayer journal 2 weeks before we hired her.
Wow. And he goes, here, I got a job for you. Just answer your question.
And while she was typing this, she saw this Roger Morneau was exposed to the biblical truth about the biblical Sabbath. And she felt the Lord go, hey, remember your prayer journal. Here's your answer. So the first Sabbath, while she was working on this, she decided to keep the Bible Sabbath.
Wow.
And a whole host of things broke loose that day.
Oh, wow. I bet.
And you see what happened in the movie. What a courageous young woman. She's the bridge.
Wow.
She's the bridge.
Wow.
Because she's sitting in her friend's room talking about this project she's working on and how she came to understand about the Sabbath. Suddenly the light started flickering on and off in the room for no reason. And then the stove in the kitchen starts sparking. It's one of those gas ovens.
Yeah.
It's clicking. But here's the thing. Her friend, this was her friend's house. Her stove hadn't been working for months.
Oh, wow.
Needed to be repaired.
Oh, wow.
It was unplugged.
Interesting.
And you see this in the movie. They ran into the kitchen and they checked under the cupboards, and sure enough, it was unplugged, but it's sparking.
Oh, wow.
There's more to the story, but you'll have to watch it.
Wow. So talk about this book for a second. Charmed by Darkness. We can actually put a link to where they can get a hold of a copy of this, but we can even do something better than that.
We're going to give one away.
We're going to give one of these away because this is an amazing story. I mean, just like you heard right here, I mean, just total transformation on somebody just typing this out. You will be changed by reading this book. This is a powerful book, so definitely get a hold of the copy of this. We'll leave a description in the link below.
So you're going to have a raffle or...
What we generally do is we put a form on our website. There's a link that we put in our description of our video. It's littlelightstudios.tv/free offer, and they'll go to that. It'll have the latest offer, which will be this book. They'll fill out the form, and I use the random number generator.
Awesome.
See how many people. Yeah, we just send it to whoever wins.
That is so awesome.
So it sounds like there was a lot of spiritual warfare going on trying to get this out. That's so cool that you can share those little details that nobody gets to see when they watch the movie.
Which isn't surprising.
No.
Because of what he went through.
Right.
And we've kind of talked a lot around the story without really kind of linearly talking about his story.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible story, But basically the short version, if you were to recap like what happened to Roger, like he was enticed into a satanic cult, and to really not just be a part of it, but really be at the top or very close to the top.
Because they not only wanted to entice him to be there, but they reached out to him specifically.
Yeah.
They told members of their cult, reach out to this guy and be here on a certain day because we want this guy on our ranks.
Yeah. And so about that same time, he meets Cyril, and he decides to do Bible studies because he knows what he's getting into over here. He kind of gets that, but he wants to know what's on the other side. And so he decides to do the Bible studies. If I remember right, he does them like in a week's time or something like that.
He's like, bring me more,
a whole bunch
more.
of them. Just eating them up.
Yeah.
And then basically at the end of it, he decides, I'm going to follow God.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna follow this path of darkness over here. I'm gonna follow God.
And all the members of this satanic cult are saying, "Don't worry, we've experienced this before. This guy is gonna be, killed.
He's dead.
He's dead." And he lived to a ripe old age. I mean, he lived for a long time. Do you remember what his age was when he died?
Yeah, I mean, he relatively older compared to what the risks were trying to get out alive.
Right.
He died at 73 from a brain aneurysm.
Yeah.
And, you know, I showed this to a small group in a home setting around the time we released it, and there was a woman crying when that part in the movie came out, and she said, you know, someone spoke over me when I was in my 20s and prophesied over me that I was going to die when I turned a certain age, in my 40s. And she said, last year I turned that age, and I was looking over my shoulder all the time, wondering when I was going to drop.
Wow.
Isn't that something? And she said, I see that the evil had no power to take Roger out.
Amen.
He died from natural causes. I mean, they didn't shoot him, and you'll see there's a storyline in there. Again, God sent more witnesses that they were harassing Roger until the year that he died.
Yeah.
The secret society tried to take him out when he interviewed on Amazing Facts.
Yeah.
The last year Roger was
Can you
living.
tell more about that story? I think that's a fascinating story.
Yeah, I mean, there's a storyline in the film, so it's developed, and he had a confidant, a young friend, because he didn't want to scare his family members about this stuff. And the week before Roger went to interview with Doug Batchelor, he got a phone call. And, you know, back in the 90s, you had landline phones. Cell phones were not the mainstream. And if you had spam calls or people calling you that you didn't want to call, you could set up a security 3-digit security code that you would then give out to your family and friends so that no one else could get a hold of you. Well, this phone call came from a stranger and somehow bypassed the security on his phone.
Wow.
And this person said, I know who you are, and we're going to have someone there ready to shoot you next week.
Oh, wow.
And Roger told Dondi. We tell Dondi's story. We reenacted Dondi's story in Charmed by Darkness. He's a typical young adult who's lost and doesn't have hope in Christ, and he's seeking something real. And he stumbles onto a Roger Morneau book on prayer. On supernatural answers to prayer, and he wants to know how this guy knows how to pray, and how is it that this man prays so powerfully and has answers from God. So he drove 7 hours without an appointment from Loma Linda to Modesto, California, knocked on Roger and Hilda's door in the early 90s.
Wow.
And they opened the door and invited this stranger into their apartment. Wow. And they became friends. And Dondi, I interviewed him in California for the film, and he talks about how Roger confided in him and told him about this death threat that he received that Roger hadn't told anybody about. Again, it just adds more credibility through witnesses that Roger was telling the truth.
So maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that he did witness that was some crazy supernatural things. I remember when I read Trippin' is Supernatural and seeing the typewriters typing with nobody sitting there at them. Do you guys bring up some of those things in here?
You know, we wrote a screenplay for really going into the experiences Roger talks about in the secret society. The docudrama was really intended to illuminate the witnesses and the documents we could find to show the rest of the story, to add credence to that part of it. Because all we have is what Roger wrote.
Right.
Yeah. But we have some pretty scary stuff in Charmed by Darkness that shows, in fact, perhaps if we have time, I could show the clip where Cyril actually finds out the devil is a real person. Do we have time to watch that?
Yeah, let's watch it.
All right.
The spirits have been trying to get in contact with me. They harass me at night.
Spirits? Those aren't spirits. They're union workers. I know just how to handle those type of people. Let's go.
I still was not a believer in the devil. I went to his house, and he lived at the end of a long hall.
What time do these union people get here?
You call them union people. They come at midnight.
And there was nothing that I could see there.
I told you, it's not union workers. It's okay. Sit down, it's fine.
I was afraid, and I sat down in the chair, and Roger said, "Don't worry, as long as I don't talk to them, they cannot communicate with me."
I didn't think it was gonna happen like this.
He said, "Don't be nervous." A knock came to his balcony door, and it was so strong that it almost knocked the wall down.
I'm doing two things, man. I'm getting rid of this gun, and I'm gonna get baptized this Sabbath. I gotta go.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Wow.
Morneau is so nonchalant about this. He's like, yeah, this happens all the time.
You know, I think it's probably because he had so much evidence on both sides of that fence that he was just like completely confident. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I know God's more powerful than this.
Right. Amen.
And I wonder what that would do to all of our faith. I think that's kind of the neat thing about reading this story is it kind of gives you a little peek into theirs, but really the power of the story is God is much stronger than any of this darkness.
Yeah. That's right.
What's fascinating, I didn't know that he was more or less harassed his whole life.
No.
I didn't know that. I thought it was kind of like once he made it out of that experience, it's kind of like, yeah, he was a prayer warrior, happily ever after. I didn't realize it was just like it kept coming back, and he still had death threats and, you know, all these attempts.
I was so privileged to be able to get to be very close to Roger's daughter and son-in-law and grandson, Michael, who are all interviewed in the film. And they all talk about some of these ongoing harassments that happened, that they witnessed.
Yeah.
They were, you know, even in their years, later in Roger's life.
Wow.
So you're right, Scotty, getting back to your comment, the book isn't glorifying Satan. You know, some people who are Christian are so afraid to talk about Satan. But there is a great battle going on. And this is why I believe Roger's story is so compelling. Even today, 2 generations later, and you heard from Amanda, who typed this book, who's only in her 30s, all the similar stuff started happening to her. Harassments, unseen. She even saw shadow people following her on the way home. I had to Google it. Never heard of it before. These are apparitions, dark apparitions that are fallen angels who are manifesting.
My daughter, who's 11 years old, actually said she's seen them before when she was, I don't know, 4 or 5. And she was talking in her room, and I went in there and I said, "Who are you talking to?" And she goes, "The shadow people." I said, "Don't ever talk to shadow people." I said, "Don't, no matter what they say, don't ever." And she's just like, "Okay." Never heard about it again after that. But
wasn't that portrayed in the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore?
I remember. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie, but they talked about shadow people in
I've
that movie?
seen shadow people in a
They
couple
didn't
things.
talk about shadow people, but there were characters that were shadows that would try to pull people into the shadows, or they would, you know, you notice they were going places. There was no physical body or anything, but there was shadows of beings, and they would
think of Peter Pan.
But the only power that the fallen angels have, and Lucifer himself,
is whatever we give him,
are the lies of deception. If he can get you to believe a lie, and his best, and that's actually, we're going to get to Beware of Angels. But the next film, we're going to talk about how he's packaged a lot of truth with lies, and he's getting away with it in the Christian church today. But I'm so glad that you brought that up. This is not a glorifying of darkness. It's the invitation and the curiosity that the devil packages stuff that makes it look like great entertainment. And you guys are so good at explaining to young people about this nice packaging. But Roger didn't stay there. He was charmed, but he made a decision to come out when he saw the truth that set him free.
A lot of people get involved in the dark sides of the entertainment industry because they believe that they'll have more power or prestige or whatever. And it's very interesting. I think there's enough evidence today that people won't deny that very easily, that goes on. I mean, there's people doing these ritualistic things out in the open. But to really hear about this happening in the 40s and, in a time that, just you didn't hear about that. And this is neat to see his journey coming out of this and really getting more charmed by Jesus.
Amen.
And I think that's
right.
a neat story.
That's what it's about in the end. Mikey, you asked about Beware of Angels. I have a clip that I brought, and it's another behind the scenes testimony of what God did while I was working on this other related film to Roger's legacy. Roger's last book was titled Beware of Angels. There was a true story of a Bible study group in Grants Pass, Oregon in the 1980s where two sisters ended up murdering some close friends, family friends in this Bible study group. And it became national news, and this woman, Sharon Halstead, has been convicted for 75 years. She's in a prison in Oregon for the rest of her life. Very sad. I wasn't going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Somebody sent me the book in the mail. I wasn't asking for it. It ended up being a second documentary. Well, now there's a third, but this was the second one that came out as it related to all of the ways that Satan packages his deceptions. He Christianizes them. He's got them in the occult. He's got them in the New Age. And you see different ways, different faces of this original lie. You will not surely die. And so I want to show you a clip of my time in Oregon, some clips from what I saw in the murder evidence, because I got to go twice to the Grants Pass Police Department. But you'll hear a voice at the end of this clip of an elderly man. You won't see his face until you watch the movie. But he's the father of the victims whose daughter was murdered. And it was a miracle that he came and gave an interview in my hotel room. Wow. You should know that they had never given an interview for over 30 years after this murder. And less than 2 months after this movie came out, suddenly Oprah's Oxygen Network, Discovery Channel, another national network wanted to come to Grants Pass and interview all these people. It was just so fascinating that God let us do ours first. And then suddenly, here comes Hollywood. They want to suddenly, but they were diving into the murder itself, and we were looking for the spiritual side of it. And you'll see when you see the movie how it ties into the immortality of the soul deception.
They asked me why I wanted to go there. I said because I want to know the truth. It's a bizarre tale that could offer sobering warnings to our generation. Sharon Halstead killed longtime friend Lynn Green and also shot Lynn's husband David and their 3-year-old boy Nathaniel. But why? In short, an angel made me do it. Our research included court documents, newspaper coverage, and 10 boxes of evidence at the Grants Pass Police Department. In addition to evidence of the crimes, the boxes included spiral notebooks and hundreds of pieces of paper, revealing the group's fascination and obsession with angels. Over a 5-year period, the group documented interactions with 160 angels who made promises and won their confidence and love.
You here in this room know more of the future than any man, woman, or child in this world. What happens within this house must not reach any man's ears. Guard this secret.
And this all in spite of the fact that they were reading the scriptures and so forth. I have no idea what the Bible studies were about or anything like that, but that was a way in for them.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
So a real quick synopsis. These two sisters were in communication with angels, or the whole group was.
Mm-hmm.
The whole group was.
Yes.
So in the Bible study, these angels were showing up and discussing things with them.
So the group started praying and asking God, hey, listen, God, you let angels appear in Bible times. Since it's the last days and we're Sabbath keepers, they basically demanded that God should give them permission to have open communication with angels. And sure enough, 3 months later, one of the people in the group, she was the one who ended up getting murdered, by the way. She was the one who started getting channeled messages from the angelic host who claimed to be from the courts of heaven.
Wow.
And some of the rest of them started seeing these manifestations. At one point, they even saw Jesus, what they believed was Jesus appearing, giving personal messages. You see that in the film. They said that Jesus got as taller than the house before he disappeared. He appeared in their living room and then just gradually grew until he was taller and went through the roof. It was signs and wonders. See, and one of them started. David Green Jr., whose wife was murdered. He was shot in the back. Their son, a 3-year-old boy, was shot in the face. You saw that in this little clip.
Oh, wow.
Shot in the face, and he lived, and he's now a quadriplegic.
Wow.
But it's just horrible. I grieved for 3 days when I read this book that Roger Morneau had written a year before he died.
Wow.
Roger didn't want to write this book. By the way, the viewers, if you're interested, come and see a brand new video on our Live Streams Media YouTube channel where Roger's talking about how he didn't want to write this book. And God made it so clear, and he talks about on this video how it was that God started giving him dreams every night. And the same dream started hitting him 3 nights in a row, and finally he knew the Lord was letting him know he had to write this book. And so he went up to the prison in Oregon from California and spent 3 days with these sisters in prison.
Oh, wow.
Now, since then, one of the sisters has been released from prison. She made parole and got released. Because she worked with the government and basically became a state's witness, and they gave her a lower sentence. But Sharon Halstead still blames the fallen angels for the mistake that she was drawn into. But here's the point, and I was sharing this with Brad before we filmed today. The whole point of this film, I saw the Lord was leading, was that these sisters murdered someone in their group because they came to believe in the dual nature of man. This angel, Naked Truth was the name this angel was coming and sending messages, started telling them that certain people were totaled. So the angel would say, Keith is totaled, and that meant that his spirit had been removed and a demon was now inhabiting his physical body.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's how she believed that she could
So
do
she
that.
was told that Lynn and David and their boy were all totaled.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't want to do it. But then the angel naked truth threatened to total her and her sister if they didn't do it.
Wow.
Does that sound like angels from heaven to you?
Right. Wow.
Satan is so deceiving. When I watched that, I was just mind blown because I was like, okay, why would these girls do this? And then the angel's saying, look, if you don't do it, you're going to be destroyed because you're not doing what God's asking you to do. He wants to use you as an instrument. Now, we say that angels wouldn't do that, but think about like when God told them, hey, you're going to make the walls of Jericho fall down, or you're going to go in there and take that city.
Right. They gave them private messages.
This is so deceptive,
right.
you know, like, and that's why it's just so important to stay in the Word. And these girls, I believe, had a
desire to follow God.
A true desire to know more, to get close to God and all that. And then this thing happens. And what you were talking about earlier, I was wanting to say something about it, about the people who sell their souls for fame and fortune and stuff. Jesus never promised anyone fame and fortune, but Satan was the one that said, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world if you bow down. And so people are doing that to this day. And how did Jesus respond? It is written, it is written, it is written. He is a spiritual foe. We cannot do anything to him except use the sword. And his whole battle against us is to keep us distracted from being in there. He doesn't have to. Yeah, he doesn't have to keep you in the occult or whatever. If he can keep you playing Bejeweled all day and keep you out of that word, then he's won.
I want to make one very important point for our viewers, and that is this murder didn't happen overnight.
Right.
Yeah. 5 years. This Bible study group, these angels, when they started, believe me, they weren't talking about being total.
Right.
If they would have started that way, that Bible study group would have known where they came from. But they first had to gain their trust. And so these angels were giving these beautiful scriptural, you know, the devil quoted scripture to Jesus, right?
Oh,
in the
yeah.
wilderness.
Wow.
So over the course of time, they were led down this road until one of their group was doing out-of-body experiences. He would center down and meditate, and he would fly off to what he believed was the New Jerusalem. And someone else in the group had another spiritual gift, as they believed they were being given these. But it was nothing more than a Christianized version of the occult. And you know, we're talking about knowing our scriptures, but you know, this is something that has been a very sobering reminder to me. The devil knows the Bible more than any human being alive. What's the difference? He fears the weakest saint. You know why? Because they have the Holy Spirit of God. See, the devil might know a lot of stuff, but he sees everything through a distortion. That bear that came into my neighborhood, by the way, I had never seen a bear on my street in over
Florida.
20 years, and it's Orlando. It's not out in the country.
Right.
The devil can't help himself.
He
came, and that God knows the devil's just going to go, and he's going to show eventually he's going to show, and he actually helped to prove that the story is true. And so he sees everything through a distortion, and we also can know a lot about this amazing book, but without the Holy Spirit.
That's right. It doesn't make the proper sense.
We're going to misinterpret it.
My cousin Deborah, who's been on this show a couple times, she actually visited a Bible study barn or something, and all these people were out there, and she said she started seeing some weird stuff. She didn't see weird stuff. She saw that the people were all about like, oh, have you seen an angel yet? And she's like, no. Oh, we all see angels out here and stuff. And then she said one time she was there. I don't know if she went more than once or whatever, but they were all doing the Bible study, and there was a little boy just sitting there, and he goes, I see Jesus. And she's like, I'm out of here. I'm freaked out. And it's just like...
So, little known fact of history. Modern day spiritualism, what we would credit to modern day spiritualism, started in the 1700s with a man named Emanuel Swedenborg. And when he was in his 50s, he started communicating on a regular basis with an angel. And that's where he got his information. And his writings are what influenced people in the 1800s, because he was probably the most educated man in Europe. So when he was writing, it was more readily available, and people were soaking up the ideas.
Yeah, the Bible talks about Satan transformed as an angel of light. So I'm really impressed with that documentary. I've watched it multiple times with friends on Amazon Prime. Is that the only place you can find it?
Yeah, you can find it now on YouTube for free.
Hey.
All right.
Thank you
Go
for
YouTube.
bringing that up.
Yeah.
That was really nice. Well, see, it's available on, Tubi. You can watch it on Tubi and on Amazon Prime. But, Amazon changed their whole thing. Yeah. Now you can't stream most documentaries no longer are free to stream with Amazon Prime membership. So I'm thankful to the Lord that now, by the way, Beware of Angels is available with subtitles in 4 languages. Awesome. German, Spanish, Portuguese, and English. So for those of you who have family members in those countries, we're now, such a melting pot of different cultures that I'm just thankful we have one place now, a global link to share it with people.
That's awesome.
Well, Chris, you are so interesting. You got to come back.
I'd love to.
Actually, you're going to come back next week. So we're glad to just get a scratching of the surface here, and thank you so much for your work in this field. I understand, give you a little sneak peek of the next week that we're gonna talk with him. You weren't always a filmmaker.
That's right. Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to get how he even got involved in this work in the first place, because I think it's by God's direction that you even started working on these projects. And thank you for blessing us. Do you have a Patreon or anything? If people want to support what you do?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, pray for this man.
But we are a not-for-profit organization. You can donate on our website at lifestreams.org. If you feel impressed to support what we're doing.
We will put a link on the description below if you'd like to communicate with Chris. Other than that, thank you so much for blessing us with your time.
Thank you.
And I look forward to hearing how you really got into this and some more. But definitely March 20, you guys, check this out. It will be streamed. The documentary Charmed by Darkness on YouTube, March 20. We'll put the link in the description below, and look forward to that.
Thanks, Scotty.
Watch the party with your friends.
That's right.